Hi, everybody. Welcome to La Lista, a LatinX writers podcast. I am your host, Ruben Mendive. And today we have a brand new guest here brought to you via virtual room. And I'm so excited to have them on. I like to start every interview by having my guests introduce themselves. So your name and how you identify for the people at home.
I am Jess Pineda. She, her are my pronouns.
Perfect. And I always like to ask my guests, where are they from? So when people ask you, where are you from? What's the short version? What's the long version?
Well, mira, I'm from Miami and there's no short version, baby. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, I grew up in Miami. I came out here in 2008, but I miss it. I miss it a lot still.
Yeah. And so I've actually never had the pleasure of going to Miami. So how would you describe it, when you were growing up, how it is now? Can you paint us a picture?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I grew up in the 90s, which is the best decade because Tupac, because everything, there was the best hip hop. It was really fun. And I feel like I grew up in a city that spoke Spanish first, which is different than here. And so when you were calling to order food, they would speak Spanish. If you didn't speak Spanish, you were kind of stuck. So even Los Blancos, everybody spoke Spanish, which is really cool. I feel like it's just growing up in a Spanish country. And I felt like as a kid when I was growing up, the girls in Miami were very fabulous and they had makeup and they knew how to be super feminine. And I had no idea. I still have very little idea how to put on more than mascara. So I felt a little bit left out, and that's kind of probably what led me to writing the most. And because I felt a little bit then it was called a tomboy. There was this one other tomboy in my school, which is a bad word, I know, but that's what we say, We also have a lot of other bad words that are not appropriate anymore, but we used to fight over who is the biggest tomboy. I'd be like, no, it's me. I like Ninja Turtles and comic books. And really had so few female friends. But it was lovely to grow up with all kinds of different Latinas, and be loud and crazy. And I think the big thing that I didn't notice growing up is that because it's such a city of color, everybody has every position. So there was a mayor Latino, there was a janitor Latino. There wasn't a designated area for being Latino. You were just in every area.
I always like to get people's family backstory. So can you tell me about your parents, your grandparents? What's their story?
Yeah, for sure. So if I write comedy, and I feel like every comedy writer has a tragic backstory, and I'm not special. So I am the child of an affair, and so I was raised by my grandparents, my grandpa primarily, and he was my sun, my moon, my stars, my everything. 6'5", a really funny guy. He worked at a funeral home, and he had all these dark stories. And he would come home. When he would come home, he would kind of lay out pictures. This is so bad. I live 6 feet under, so he would lay out pictures of dead people and be like, "Oh my God, can you believe this person lost an arm while they were dying?" Or there was crazy stories. And so it was most of the time just me and him, and this crazy dark sense of humor. But I think because of his job, he was a medical examiner and he had a funeral home. He had to he used humor to deal with all the sadness that he had to see. And that was probably the best gift he could have given me.
So, I'm always curious about people during their high school years. So 14 to 18, I frame it in these 3 questions. Who were you? Who were you pretending to be? And how do you think other people saw you at this time?
So I was back in the day, I went to a magnet school, and it was for magnet dance. And I was a really good dancer, and dance was another outlet for me. And I was part of this very cool group of girls, but I was the only girl who was not cool. So it was me being having to have some kind of talent and be able to dance. And they're like, yeah, but you don't know how to be a girl, quote unquote. And so I was a little bit, I was left out. I feel a lot in high school. I felt I had 1 or 2 close friends, but mostly kind of just a little bit of a loner. That was okay. I don't feel sad about it, honestly. I feel it gave me a lot of time to read and write. And then I think you asked me, what do people think of me? I don't know that people thought of me, honestly. I think that people are so worried now thinking about it. People are so worried about themselves when they're growing up that they were no concern about this weird girl who happens to be able to do a jeté across the floor. No interest in me. And then what was the other question? Sorry.
And who are you pretending to be?
was trying very hard to be one of those girls. God bless. Like trying so hard to be somebody who could wear jeans with heels and not like Jordans.
And so like, how did you get into dance? Like what, because you're in a magnet program for it. So like, it's something obviously that you wanted to pursue. So how did you get into it?
Yeah, I was, I danced from when I was little. I grew up without a lot of money. And so most of the time my dance classes were like a trade-off. So I would work at the front desk and then get to go to, point class for free or whatever. But I started dancing. I had this teacher who was from New York, and she was just like in a regular kind of school in the hood. And she was like, you are really good at this. And so she moved me to kind of higher level classes and helped me and trained me, and was really cool. And dance also saved me, because I was also like in my room dancing to Shakira or something, like Moscas en la Casa was like the song that I would be like interpretive dancing to, having a feeling. Yeah, Shakira was such a big influence for me too.
And so what'd you do after high school? Did you have a plan? Did things go according to plan?
Well, during high school, I was like 17, and I moved out when I was still in high school. My husband now, we were dating then. I've been dating him since I was 17, and I had the landlord call my husband's house instead of me. Well, my boyfriend then. And then his mom thought that he was moving out and kicked him out. And so we ended up moving together. She got so mad. You know how Latina moms are like, you want to leave? That way, go, pack your bags. Your shit's outside. He was 20, so it was more acceptable. And I love her now. But we ended up living together. And then I went to community college for dance, because that's what I could afford. And I worked full time. And then I really loved dance. And it was still like still one of my passions. I do it just for fun because I think it's beautiful. But I had this teacher who I wrote a paper on Marlene Dietrich. And I literally wrote it in, like 15 minutes. Boom, boom, boom. And the teacher failed me and said I was lying. I didn't write it. I framed this picture, because I didn't frame my degree, but I framed this picture because it changed my life a little bit. This failure of an essay. And he wrote all in the sidelines, like, who wrote this? This is too good to be written by a student. It's not written by you. It's like scribbled all over and highlighted. And to be honest, like I said, I wrote it 15 minutes. So I was like, oh shit, maybe I'm a good writer. And I kept the F and framed that. So it changed it. I changed my major after that class.
So you changed your major. Like, did you sort of have an idea of what you were going to do? Like what direction you was there anything you were aiming for?
No, I wanted to be, well, no, that's a lie. I did. I wanted to go get my doctorate in medieval English literature, because that's what every young Cuban girl likes to study. No, because I love Chaucer, and I was really lucky to, even at community college, have teachers after I switched to English that were teaching at Yale and Harvard, and they would just like do semesters there, and they were great and super smart and encouraging. I wanted to be like the next C.S. Lewis, I guess you could say. I wanted to write imaginative stories for kids that could help them escape like the shit they were going through, because that's what really helped me as a kid. And then I didn't get into any of the colleges I wanted. So I was like, shit, I guess I'm not C.S. Lewis. That's fine. I was still with my husband. And so he had always wanted to be a director, and we knew nobody in Hollywood. And so I was like, well, I found this like weird production program from ABC. And since we knew nothing about television, I was like, I'll apply for that, and I won't tell him. So I wrote his essay. Did all his paperwork. I sent that shit in, and he got in. Okay. He was like, what the hell did you do? And I was like, I don't know. My bad. And that's how we came out here.
How did you find your way to like your career now? Because, it seemed like you really were like a lit person. So like, how did you find your way to like Hollywood?
I mean, to be honest with you, I never thought I would work in Hollywood. I was like, I didn't know about the gossip magazines. Like all my friends were up on like Star, and they knew who was dating who, and Fulana was with Fulana. I never was into that. Not that it's bad, it's fun, but it's never been for me. But I came out here, and I was originally working with a nonprofit that did dance and drama classes for disabled youth. And it was a grant writer. And the woman who ran the program, after I submitted a grant for $50,000, she bought an Impala. So she embezzled funds from disabled youth. And I was like, well, fuck, if I'm going to like steal from people, I might as well just make a lot of money doing it. So I became an assistant at ABC Studios. And I worked for this amazing woman named Nicole Norwood, who still is working today. And she's just like, I knew nothing. I shouldn't have had that job. I didn't know what ICM or CAA or any of those letters were. I was just like I don't know, I can pick up a phone, I'm really smart. And she was like, all right, cool, let's roll. And she basically taught me everything about TV. She was kind of my crash course in television.
I'm famous for telling people that the first 2 years in LA are the hardest, but if you can sort of get through those years, you sort of know you're here to stay because you can move back at any time before then. So I'm just curious what those first 2 years were like for you.
Really hard because I felt like I was trying to write in a format I had no idea about. I didn't have friends. I would go to like Porto's thinking it's a Cuban bakery and order a tostada, which for me is bread and butter on Cuban bread toasted. And those fuckers gave me a salad and I lost my mind crying. I was like, never, blasphemy. And I again am not from a wealthy family, so I was on food stamps, and I was on and that was really hard because I feel like I looked around at my counterparts that were well off, and it was hard to be like, oh, your parents are paying for your Malibu beach house, but I'm literally at the dollar store trying to count if I have enough for strawberries and blueberries. Like it was really, really hard. But I somehow am very hard-headed also. So I knew that like at the end goal was to be a writer, and that was punto sin comma, like that's what was going to happen. But I remember doing my first spec script was like a Hannah Montana spec script, and I couldn't afford Final Draft because I couldn't buy strawberries. So I was like, I had to like measure it on either side of the Word document and like go space. So I wrote it in Word and tried to fake it. It was crazy.
Yeah, so I'm curious of like how you got to the point where you're like, oh, I'm going to start writing spec scripts, like because you move out here, you're sort of just following, sort of helping your husband sort of like pursue his thing. So like, when did it come to you that it's like, oh, this is the new format I'm going to write in?
For sure. I feel like I was working on a novel at the time, and I wrote in mostly dialogue. So I was like, oh, this kind of translates. And I've never been a person, like I'm a lit person, but I was never a person who was like good at grammar or spelling. I just felt like the stuff I was most interested in kind of read like the way we talked, the way people speak. And I was like, oh, that's interesting for TV. I never shouldn't say this. I never was like, oh, I want to make something get made. I was just like, I liked writing in a format that felt authentic to the way like people spoke.
And so, you mentioned you were sort of like on the assistant track. So I know everybody, that journey is different for them. So I'm curious of like what that track was like for you.
I was lucky to work for this one woman who was a badass. I'll be real honest, because she would like let me read so many scripts. And I saw so many writers come in and pitch ideas and have them be successful or unsuccessful or be great ideas and then fail miserably. Like not because of the idea or the script. It was just like wrong time, studio didn't want it, whatever the thing. So it was interesting to work 2 years in the process where I would eventually be pitching to and not take it personal when they didn't want to make my project that I worked with them for so long. And they said that they loved. And so I learned a lot under her. And then she was like, look, you are never going to be a writer. You can be my assistant as long as you want, but you're never going to be a writer until you get out there and make less money and be assistant to a showrunner or another writer. Like you need to go on a show. And so she basically was like, I love you, but you have to leave. And that was so helpful. So I went to work for this guy named Zach Astron, who is the coolest dude. I was really fortunate to work for very cool people very early, or else I would have like skedaddled my ass back to Miami. Because he was so encouraging, and I was his assistant for a while. And then when he finally got a show on the air, I was like, hey, I want to be the writer's assistant. No, his assistant for one show called The River. And then when he got another show on the air called 0 Hour, I was like, I want to be the writer's assistant. And he was like, of course, let's roll. So I was very lucky to just have an easy track in that way and work for people that were really supportive. After that, I knew I love drama, but I didn't think I wanted to start out writing drama. I see everything through a comedic lens. So I needed to go kind of like go work in comedy. And I worked on a few Disney shows. Some were real rough. And then I was like, oh, I had wonderful bosses because now I work for an ass. I understand. And that was good for me too, because sometimes I would be crying in the bathroom because they called me the maid, and that was tough. And then my first job was I did the Fox Writers program, which was amazing. It was really fun. I met a lot of friends there, and the woman that was heading it was this girl named Gina Reyes, who's an agent now, and she was so supportive, and she gathered this group of people that have like all of us became successful, which is amazing. It's like the impossible dream. That program offered you the opportunity to staff on a show for free, so it kind of like gave you your first job and paid you full salary, which was a big deal.
You sort of mentioned that you were writing like a Hannah Montana spec.
Yeah.
That you worked on kids shows. So I'm just curious of what attracted you to that, and also like what that experience is like.
I think that like I don't work on kids shows anymore, but at the beginning it was kind of my dream was like, when I come up here, like I want to just work on a show that can make kids laugh. I think again because I feel like you always want to go back and heal the parts that were kind of burned, and that the kid part of it, like the tween part of it, it was really a hard time for me. And so working on those shows made me feel like I got to make a kid laugh if he was having a shitty family situation or whatever the case was, he or she or they.
How did you transition to like more like adult comedies?
Sure. When I was a writer's assistant, I did mostly kid shows. And then I got like a script here and there, which was great to kind of try out and see what that was like. My first show though was called LA to Vegas, which was on Fox. So I've done mostly, I don't think I've as a writer done a kid show, like as a writer's assistant, I was definitely on kid shows. And so that was an adult show. And then that was really, really fun. And that was like 17 people. And there's a woman who's a Latina named Danielle Sanchez Witzel, who is like the coolest human being ever. And I just, it was very, very fun to be on that show. At that time I was on a writing team. I'm no longer on the team. I was really fortunate to have such a good experience. I mean, we were wild. We would like, it was crazy to me to like, be making so much money at the time. And for me, splitting a staff writer salary was so much money. Like I was balling out of control. I could buy like all the strawberries at the dollar store. Like that shit was wild.
I'm curious of like what you notice, being in both like a kid show and more like adult comedies. Like how were the rooms different? How were like the notes different, the networks? Like what things did you like sort of pick up from both?
I feel like kid shows sometimes are almost harder to do because you have to make it funny, but you cannot say a bad word. You cannot allude to anything offensive. You cannot like, you have like this really small box to play in. And if you cannot scoop it up real good, like it's just going to be flat. So I feel like, adult shows give you a little bit more leeway to curse here and there. And sometimes and that's low hanging fruit, right? Like just saying the F word can make somebody laugh. The rooms were usually writers that were like up and coming, and or people that have been a little bit more established. And I feel like the network room, it felt like I wasn't me, but it felt like somebody had backed up a money truck at these people's houses and like just let it rain, and not, there was no like selfish bone about it, but they would be like, I don't know, I want to order ice cream for lunch. It's $300. It's fine. I got it. No problem. And that to me, I was like, $300? And that was like coffee runs. And so that was the money aspect was like very surprising to me.
How many other Latinx writers were you seeing? Like when was a time when you felt like, oh, I'm like sort of supposed to, where I'm supposed to be to sort of tell the right stories?
For every show I've been on, I was the only Latinx person in the room, except for one show. Wait, I'm trying to think. No, Danielle was also on LA to Vegas, and I'm trying. Forgive me if I scan through and I'm missing something because I'm elderly. But the one show that I remember being like, oh my God, I almost cried. It was I was on Love Victor, and there was two other Latinx writers. There was Danny Fernandez and Marcos Uevanos. And it was so cool to be like, there is Danny's Cuban and Marcos is Mexican. And it was so cool to be like, there are three of us in this room. That it never in my mind, like to know that like, and they were wonderful human beings. Like I could talk to Danny about like being home, and we were just like speaking in Spanish, making jokes. And it was, I've never felt that again, to be honest with you. But it was pretty incredible.
And, I'm always curious about people who are in like, especially comedy rooms. Comedy rooms are sort of like a mystery to me, but I'm just curious of like what you took away once you started working in those rooms as a writer and started applying to your own writing.
I feel like there's a few things. I feel like my when I was in a writing partnership, I think for the first two jobs I was in a writing partnership, so Love Victor and LA to Vegas, I was still learning. It's really hard when you're a staff writer to like, or a story editor maybe even, to go into a room that are all these like big fancy writer names and feel like your joke could be as good as theirs. I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and so I think that even in my writing, I had to learn to just like be me and balls out. And if they don't like it, oh, bueno, that's like on them, not on me. That was tricky. I feel like what I learned more and more is that the more I am comfortable, and it's such like cookie cutter advice, the more I was comfortable in myself, the more people wanted to be around me. People wanted to hear the ideas. People wanted to buy my pitches because they were like, well, you're not afraid to be vulnerable. And like, that's the one thing I think that really connects with other writers and audiences is the idea that like, we're all kind of the same, but here's my version of same.
Because you're working on like network sitcoms, like, and I feel like that's such a like in this universe of like new streaming services out every second. What is it like to still be sort of like working in a field of television that is sort of just like been the format since like the start of it?
It depends on what show you're on, right? I feel like the show that I'm currently on is really lovely. It's run by a Black woman, and we have such a range of people in our room. People like where they're from, what they look like, what their background is, age, everything. And I think that is a credit to the woman's name is Magda Loach. It's a credit to her, but that's usually not the case. I feel like it definitely is a lot of fun. This is the first time I've worked on a multicam in a while, so it's like being in a play and every day like pitching stuff on the floor that works, and it's really fun, but definitely different than single cam. The one thing I feel like that I enjoy about it is that I get to go to set and really produce my episodes versus like when I was on a show called Run the World. I'm sure that I would have been able to go, but it was COVID. And so I feel like with the other shows that you kind of like write in advance, it's tricky to see what's working week to week. So it's what I do like about it, especially in comedy, is that you get to see who is the best at, physical comedy, who can really land a blow, like the end of joke of the scene, like who to kind of rely on in those ways. And you see it live. So it's more helpful than being like, oh, backtracking once we've written all 10 episodes and then being like, oh, we should have written more of physical comedy for this character, but it's too late because you're done.
And so like, how has a pandemic year treated your like writing, your career? Like what what has been the like result of this pandemic year for like how you've done your job?
Ooh, honey. Well, I was really, I was really fortunate that I've worked the entire pandemic. I was on 4 Zoom rooms, kind of like back to back to back to back, and did a few development things. So I think the first when my first one was this show called Run the World, which is on Stars, and it's about 4 Black women like running the shit out of Harlem and dressed like the fashion, so beautiful. It's like a walking work of art. But that was the first room, and nobody knew what Zoom was. Like nobody knew how to transition, but it was cool because we were in a new room and we got to meet each other in person and like fuck around a little bit for a couple of weeks, and then go write our stuff. And we had broken a lot of things, so that was easy in that way. But there were some rooms that like I never met the people that I spent hours and hours with, and sometimes had crazy Zoom fatigue. So that was sad and weird. I feel like part of the fun of being a writer in a writer's room is like messing with people. So I missed like messing up, like putting tinfoil all over somebody's office or something, or like, like just having fun, which breaks the kind of the pace of making a TV show, which is always fun, but I miss the community of it.
And you sort of mentioned that you love like sort of being able to produce your episodes, which is becoming very much rare for writers now in this streaming age. So I'm just curious of like that experience, with the neighborhood. Like, was there still like Zoom protocols, and like I'm just curious of like was there a live audience? Like how did that all work?
We have on the show, we have laughers. So there's professional people that like sit and laugh. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if you could follow me every day, honey. But on this show, we have like a couple of writers go to stage. And so I go every week or so. Like if it's my episode, I'll definitely be there. But sometimes you'll be there to help out somebody's episode and just pitch jokes or, make sure everything is going okay on set. And I feel like just being there is really helpful. We have to get tested, a bunch of times, and our whole room is vaccinated, thankfully. But yeah, that part has been, that's been really, really great. Like really knowing how to produce our episodes. I was on one other single cam that we all went to set. It was called Home Economics. And it was like still like really young in people getting vaccinated and COVID and stuff. So it was like, it would be, instead of like messing around with the actors or playing, and having fun, you would like sit in this like tiny room with the director, and like you weren't supposed to leave, you weren't supposed to drink water, you're just supposed to sit there and like be funny, just you. It's a lot of pressure, but also it was really fun. Everybody was really kind on that show. Yeah, but I think that since the numbers have gone down, it's been fun to have like a couple writers, and it almost feels real, like real life on the neighborhood at least.
And, I'm always curious about my guests, like, because, we talked a little bit about you working on other people's shows, but I'm curious of like your own writing. So like, sometimes as writers, we tell the same story over and over. There's themes, there's things we're working out. So what are some of the through lines that you see appear through all the work you do?
I think the through lines is that I'm always, you're so right, that it's always like something that you're working out that you didn't realize, like a new problem you had in yourself. And I know I spoke a little bit about like having issues becoming friends with women because I was not the type of woman that I thought that they wanted. And my last pilot was about like female friendship and how scary that was for me. But the female friendship aspect was hard for me because I have 2 kids, and 8 and 5, and I wasn't in a mom's group, and because I was like, oh, they're not gonna like me, and it was like these pre-imposed kind of like judgment calls that I thought other women would make that they were never making. Like it was never happening, Jess. Like, honey, we could have had so many friends. And so I feel like I was learning that lesson as I wrote that last one of the last pilots, and that was really healing to be like, wait a minute, like I sometimes would judge specifically like women that were like white women. When I would pick up my kid, they assumed that I was a nanny because like it's a lot of Latinas that are picking up children. How I felt like other, and how I felt a little bit again like a little bit of an imposter. But some of the imposter syndrome, a lot of the imposter syndrome was about me thinking people were making judgment calls on me that weren't happening. And once I was like, maybe I don't care if they are judging me, and maybe they are, and like who gives a shit, then that got easier. I'm
curious about people that have been in LA a long time, been sort of working at this field for a little bit. And I'm just curious of like your sense of like Latinx community just in this weird business.
I feel like there are definitely like, if there's another Latino in the room or Latina, like Latinx, like I am, again, I always say Latino, like I don't mean to, but I'm old.
Yeah, I mean, whatever floats your boat.
No, but I'm trying to say it right. It's like, okay, stuff. I always feel like immediately like it's like taking a deep breath. I don't know. I feel like whenever I see another Latino on TV, it's like there's an incomparable kind of joy and relief in the same time, because there's a lot of the early parts of my career were spent explaining how Cubans didn't grow up eating tacos, or like we're all different. I have different continents, and they're just like, what? No, that's crazy. You love tacos. No, I actually don't. And there's like no hate on tacos. It's just not who I am. There was a lot of stress in that, and being like the youngest person in the room to hold every country. They're like, tell me about Peru. I'm like, I'm not Peruvian. We're all different. Can we play this game again? So definitely whenever I see somebody else that's Latinx in the room, I am so happy, or on TV. And I think that that part of the community is always really tight. There's this thing called a Latino writers group that I can be like, hey, for example, which is super helpful. On my next episode, I wanted to write in an Afro-Latina because I feel like they don't get a lot of exposure, and there's very few. And so there was trouble with casting, finding somebody. And I was like, hey, y'all send me the people. And they sent me the people, this like group of Latinas, and then the people are great, of course, like this group of wonderful Afro-Latina actors that are both Black and Latina. And so that part of the community is really good, because I feel like we're all pretty down for like, we're pretty down for each other, because I think there's enough opportunity for everybody to go around there. There's no need to like hold one opportunity. There's not one position for us. Like it's great.
Yeah. And I'm curious what your family thinks about like, because you leave Miami, you're in LA, you're like working in television. So I'm just curious of like, I don't know, what do you glean from like what they think you're doing and what you're doing out here?
Well, my grandpa's passed away, so he didn't really get to see me like become super famous like I am now. But he's always with me. But my husband's family is still in Miami too. And so when I go back and I'm like, you don't get like, I don't want café con leche because it's like a lot of sugar. And they're like, ay, mira la Hollywood, no quiero café con leche, vas para Starbucks. You know, like it's always a lot of drama if I want to have a black cup of coffee. Like that is crazy. So they think that they definitely think that I'm like walking around in a parade of heels and like full ball gowns at all time. But that's fine. You know, what are you going to do?
I did want to ask about this and I could cut this out, but you know, there was like a regime change at the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I'm sort of curious of like, because now it's sort of like, listen, I never really watched Neighborhood before because a white guy gentrifying a neighborhood is just not the premise I lead towards. But now there's a regime change, and like now the show is actually really changing in the types of stories they're telling.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious of like, what is that like in the room, and also what is it like to be a part of like this sort of like redirection for a show?
It's been lovely because the showrunner I had written a pilot with her before, and she's brilliant. So it's not like I didn't get to work for somebody that I didn't admire. So like I was so fortunate to have a few job offers and be like, this is the person I want to work for. Like I also don't love gentrifying things that don't need to happen. But Meg has really like brought in the whole neighborhood to make it be like, hey, let's have an Afro Latina. Hey, let's talk about this other character that lives down the street. Hey, like let's like make it a full real neighborhood versus like a focused story on one person trying to make it more white. For lack of a better term. I don't know if that's terrible. But all of us on the staff were new except for one guy who's great. And he's been really helpful in like guiding what has worked and what hasn't worked. But the showrunner is also not afraid to like push back and tell stories about miscarriage. And I think we spent a lot of time too, making sure the women don't feel like accessories to a story, but have their own kind of like full ideas, just like women do. It's wild. We really get out there. And that's been really wonderful.
And, you know, what are some of the things that they don't really teach you about writing on like multicams? Like, because it feels like it's such a beast and such a like it's like also kind of a rarity now. So I'm just curious of like, what is the stuff that if you're looking to write multicams and like just things that you can just like be like, okay, this is what you need to see on the page. This is what's going to help you out once it's being shot, and also like stuff on set.
Yeah, no, for sure. I had never worked on a multicam like this before too. So it was like a big crash course. I'm like, we can't just like go in and follow him around the house. What do you mean? Just stay the camera's still there? Jesus. And so that part was tricky because I feel like sometimes it's a little hard to tell stories that are emotionally fulfilling if you kind of can't like get really in there in a scene that's like about something deep like a miscarriage. But fortunately, like all the people on the show are really talented, and even, you know, if you can't kind of like follow or make these interesting camera moves, it still worked. I say that the thing that was tricky was like the formatting for me, which I know is dumb, but I was like, why are we lettering scenes? I don't A, B, C, like I don't know my alphabet. Like, why are we doing this? And it's a little bit faster. So I tend to write more of like the joke emotion kind of stuff. But this is like joke, but like the motion is still behind the joke. So it's a little tricky. You have to be really, really quick, I feel like, with the ability to tell a joke and make sure it still like connects to the story.
I sort of hate this question because it's very like Hollywood, but like, what's next for you? What are you working on next? Like, what are you looking forward to?
There's this movie that's kind of in the works I can't talk about, but I'm super excited about it. And another thing that's in the works that I can't talk about, this is also very Hollywood. It'd be like, yeah. I can't tell you anything, honey, but it's going to be beautiful. Yeah, I feel so fortunate to just honestly every day like be working. I still like will take pictures of my scripts and I'm like, I wrote another episode of a thing. So I am definitely really grateful. I think that the thing that I'm learning to do is say no, because I'm fortunate that I have people that'll be like, what about this idea? What about that idea? What about that idea? And I come from a background that I don't, again, I've said it 1,000 times, I didn't have a lot of money. So when you're like, here is $5, I'm like, bitch, I got it. I have, you know, and I am still learning to like value my time and my effort and my energy and like kind of create like barriers of like what is right for me at this moment. So that's like a thing that I'm currently learning how to do. But yeah, I'm excited about the other things that are coming out too.
what are the stories that you're like dying to tell? What is like, you don't have to give us the exact premise, but what is just like a story and like, or a thing that you're like just dying to be like put on screen?
I'm really dying to tell the story of growing up with my grandfather. I just feel like it was so dark and so weird and so fun and so hurtful. And there was so much pain that we both went through. And I feel like you don't always see shows that are like, you see multi-generational shows, but you don't see like this. We skipped a whole generation, but we were still like ride or die homies. Like his nickname was G-Funk because he loved Warren G and Nate Dogg's Regulate. So whenever he would pick me up from school, he would like blast Regulators and his big ass Lincoln. And so like that was just him. So I'd be like G-Funk, and everybody thought I was the coolest chick. And he saved me. So I feel like otherwise I wouldn't have had a shot in life. I would have been like a foster kid. So I think telling stories about families that don't look like what the mother, even though I'm very lucky to have mother, daughter, son, kids, everybody, to tell stories about an adopted grandfather and a little girl who worshiped him and how they kind of rocked the world is a story that I definitely want to tell. But also stories, I really want to tell stories for young people that don't know that they have the kind of like opportunity to succeed wildly. Because like from a little girl who grew up with like bars on her windows and stolen cable, I didn't even know this was a job. I didn't know that was an option. Like, yeah, I guess the idea of like, it makes me want to cry. I get so emotional because I care. The idea of telling, young Latinx people, Black, brown, everybody, like just to be like, I want to tell stories that inspire people to dream really wild and really big and then fucking kill it,
Yeah. And, I know for a lot of Cubans, the relationship to like the homeland is a little like complicated. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious of like what your relationship is with Cuba.
I love Cuba. I know right now it's in turmoil, but it's like a little bit of, it's a surprise for the world, but it's not a surprise for us. I used to work in Cuba. I was a grant writer for a nonprofit that like administered humanitarian aid and medicine. So I used to, before I came out to LA, I was like, I would travel back and forth with like insulin and Tylenol and antibiotics and like secretly drop it off. And the Cuban government would stop me and they would like put me in a detaining room and they'd had all these like big guns. And I was like an 18 or 19-year-old kid. And they would be like in Spanish, like, what are you doing here? Where are you going? And I was like, I'm coming here to party and like have a good time. And they would, question me and try to scare me. And I was young and dumb enough to not care. As an adult, I'd be terrified. But when you're 18, 19, you think you're invincible. I was like, go away, brujo. Like, I don't have time for you. I'm going to go party. But I went for humanitarian purposes. So I definitely, I hope for a free Cuba. I wish for a free Cuba very, very cautiously. And my kids have like protested here and made signs and, because it's the least, like walking on the street with a sign is the least I can do to support everything that's happening over there.
Yeah. I'm curious, especially in this like sort of like resurgence of just like protesting and the social media like infographic sort of like reshare age we live in, what it's like to like sort of see some of that news blow up on social media and circulate, and to like have such a personal connection to it. Like what is that like to like know something your whole life and hold a truth about a place that all of a sudden you see plastered everywhere?
To be honest, I like my first instinct, and this is not a healthy instinct, was like sit down and be quiet. I don't want you to get shot. Like my first instinct is like, oh God, please, like don't get hurt, because you hear stories and you have family members that are that have come from there, and my first instinct was fear. But then I was like, all the people over there are so fucking brave. Like it's incredible, and awe-inspiring. It's a little like I'm still like a little out of my body about it, because it's like when I would go there, and I know that people like when I would go there before COVID, like in 2005, you would have paid 25 cents per square of toilet paper. Like if you wanted toilet paper, that's what you had to pay for it. And like that to me is just like quintessential Cuba. Like there's no coffee is like not coffee. It's all, like chicory stuff. And so to know people are struggling for so long, and to know that the government is hiding it very well and has no fear in taking your land and, killing your food, like killing your cows and killing, like it's scary. Like I'm partly scared still, but I'm still really, but more now hopeful and proud that there'll be a change, you know, now that actually the people over the world can see what's happening, that they can't block, you know, Instagram from sharing videos of the truth. I'm hopeful.
And I sort of like feel like this also is like a weird question, but I'm curious of like what it is to like be a working writer and also like a mom. Like, because I've talked to some moms where like they love the Zoom room because they're like, I can spend more time with my kids. I don't have to like run around everywhere. So I'm just curious of like just what that experience is like. You know, I'm not a mom. I don't think I'll ever be lucky enough to be one. But I'm curious, like, what is it like trying to juggle like a career that also like kids and an industry that's also not super stable too?
It is like being on Zoom has been a gift because I feel way less guilty. Like during lunch, I can go pick up my kids if they're off early or something, or like they come home, I get to hug them, even if it's for just like a little bit. So being on Zoom has been like a huge gift, even though it's I get Zoom fatigue and it's like a little hard to concentrate after a while, you know. I feel like now, like maybe the higher up you get, not higher up, but like the more established you get, the less people are worried about it. But I've definitely been in places where like when I was pregnant and I never had a job, I was like, I'm not telling people I'm pregnant. What if they like think I'm not going to be able to work or something, you know? So that was, it always feels like something, it felt like something that you had to hide. I don't know that that's really changed, to be honest with you, depending on who you're talking to. But I think that now knowing, before at the beginning, I would have been like, I will work for anybody, even if I never see my kids, even if like I just need to get started. And now I definitely don't want to work for people who are unkind in that way, that are like, you know, selfish in that way, for sure, because it can be tough.
Is there anything else we haven't talked about or anything you wanted to cover?
No, well, yeah, I guess maybe like from a person that was an assistant for a long time that often felt like it was never going to happen, or not never going to happen, but it's taking forever, or maybe I'm not talented, or, you know, maybe like I'm an assistant in the room and thinking, in my case, a joke to pitch or a story to tell. I just want to encourage people that are up and coming to be really fucking brave, because that's the only way you get through, to keep trying, even if you feel like you're continuing to fail, because eventually I know so many untalented people that are working. So like you just need a little bit of talent and a lot of luck and people, you know, behind you. But just to keep trying, because there's a lot of dumbasses that have jobs. So why you're not a dumbass, essentially.
I sometimes joke about this. I'm like, I can't wait till just like mediocre, like black or brown people are just hired for stuff. Like, can't we just be mediocre too? And like,
it's crazy.
You know, I'm always curious of who my guests are a fan of. So these could be peers, heroes, friends of yours, people you creep on social media who don't know who you are, but you're obsessed with them. So who are some of those writers for you?
I mean, like, I have the obvious Gloria Calderon, you know, because she's Cuban and she's done so much, but and she's so lovely. But I will have to say, like, it's been all the Latino writers that I've been in rooms with. Like Marcos Lebanos is just like such a lovely human and really inspired me when I needed it the most. I feel like, you know, like Tanya Stracho is so good. I love her. I love her work. I love Vida. I love Hentified. I love people that are not scared to tell stories about. I was watching Hentified too. Have you seen it?
I'm holding off season 2 until I'm emotionally ready to process.
So good. What do you mean? You need to like have a full feeling?
I just need to like center my body before that show devastates me. You know, I need to be in a good place or I won't make it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, get ready to be devastated. It's a beautiful show, and like I'm just in awe of it. Honestly, I'm in awe of the production of it. I'm in awe of the writing and how brave the storytelling is, and how nothing feels cookie cutter, but everything feels like I've lived in that moment so many times, and how it transcends like Latinx culture, even though it's obviously about a Mexican family. I definitely have been, you know, sitting on milk crates in the back of like somebody's like backyard smoking a blunt. That's just like, it's so quintessential to how loud and caring and fucked up we are. So that is definitely something that I aspire to continue telling stories like that.
Where can people follow you on social media?
I'm so bad because like I'm private. So if people try to follow me, I'm like, no, unless I know you, niña, no. But if you message me, then I can see that like you're a human, not like some weird person who's trying to creep on my kids.
Yeah.
You know, because my pictures are very boring. It's like mostly trees and my kids and like, I don't know, another flower.
Yeah.
Or maybe some witchcraft stuff. Like every now and again, it's very cute full moon ceremonies. but the Jess Pineda, I guess. I don't do the Twitter, even though I'm there. I think the last time I was there, like it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I didn't have gray hair, so it's been a minute. But definitely, I'm definitely there if they want to. Just message me and be like, "Hi, I'm a human. It's okay."
I always like to have my guests help me title the episode.
Okay.
So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer. I use this as a community building tool just so we can, again, just like you said, so people see the title, they're like, that's like me. I should listen to the story. I should check out this writer's work. So like, what do you got?
I don't know if it's too long, but I wrote this. A Miami-bred cubanita writer que no tiene pelo en la lengua. Or maybe still says the Alan Salmon. I don't know if it's too long.
I don't think, listen, I've heard long ones. I like this one though. I think it's like, yeah, I know who this person is then. Yeah. And with that, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was such a fun conversation. It's good, always good to meet a new writer and like discover the wealth of knowledge and experience that they have. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for doing this and for caring that much for other people and for yourself and for all of us, to be represented. It's like a very giving and kind thing you're doing. And you have very high vibrations.
Thank you. You're full LA now, huh? Vibration.